Hey everybody. Today I want to talk a little bit about UV sterilization or UV clarification, depending on how you want to look at that. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss, is how we look at that and what's the difference between a UV sterilizer versus a UV clarifier. And we're going to look at my water system, and we're going to look at a filter, and we're going to discuss all of it. So first of all, let's go over to my water system, and we are going to take a look at a Class A UV sterilizer. Alright, this canister here in front of us is my UV sterilizer, and it is indeed a Class A UV sterilizer. If we lift this up, the UV tube is connected to that. It runs down inside of a sleeve, and the water comes in and it flows around that sleeve back up and out and into my house. And the reason it is classified as a Class A sterilizer is because of the volume of water it treats and the intensity with which it treats it. First of all, the classification is not a classification that we will find in the aquarium industry. It's a classification that comes in the water and the drinking water industry. So when we get back over to the filter, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about the differences between the two. But this is a Class A sterilizer because the intensity of light for the volume of water that travels over it means that as the water leaves this system, it has been sterilized. And that also means we're talking about water that is clean enough to be presumed to be safe to drink. So in other words, we can't run, say, floodwaters through this, or if I was desperate and there was a sewage leak and the water was contaminated or whatever, this sterilizer would not be up to the task of purifying that water. This is sort of a fail-safe just to make sure anything's in the water. It will get killed as it passes through. Now, it doesn't actually kill it for the most part. What it does is the UV radiation does damage to the genetic code within the single-celled organism, and it renders it sterile. It prevents it from being able to breed or reproduce, and that way when it comes through there, even if the organism is still alive, it doesn't matter because it can no longer reproduce. If enough damage occurs, it will actually kill the organism, but the idea is to simply sterilize the organism, and it does this as it flows through this cylinder. So we've got 12 gallons per minute can go through there, and at 12 gallons per minute we have to be rated at a certain amount of light. If the light was more intense, we could run more water through it. If the light was less intense, we would actually have to slow the water down. But there is an actual formula of light intensity versus volume of water over a given period of time that is what gives you your Class A rating. So now let's go over and have a look at the aquarium filter, and it's going to be something completely different altogether, although it's pretty much exactly the same, just scaled way down. Alright, it turned out to be easier just to go ahead and bring the filter over here. So this is your standard canister filter. This is a Sun 304B, but they're all built basically the same. It's a simple canister that's more or less hollow. It holds your filtration trays. This top section comes off, and let's see if I can do this with one hand. And as it comes out, likewise, it has a UV tube that goes down inside a sleeve. So let me set this down out of the way. And it's as simple as that. As the water pumps through the filter, it goes down through here, it swirls around past this tube, down into the bottom of the filter, and then it comes up through all the trays, through all your filtration media, and then back out and into the tank. So that's important, and we're actually going to go over and have a look at one of the fish tanks while we discuss it, rather than standing here looking at a torn apart filter. But they both basically work the same way. The light is inside of a cylinder. The water passes over the cylinder and is exposed to the UV radiation as it does so. So now let's go over to the tanks and we'll talk about what the differences are. Alright, now there's two main differences between the two types of systems. One is a matter of industry terminology, and then the other one is a little more important, and it's a little more mechanical. When you think about my actual sterilizer versus what we've got in this fish tank, what happens to that water? It passes the sterilizer. It gets one chance to go past that UV light before it goes into my drinking glass, and then I'm consuming that water. So, in order to be considered a sterilizer, it has to be intense enough to kill, I'll just say kill, or at least sterilize any microbial life that might pass through there in one shot. This is a 55-gallon tank, and the filter we looked at moves roughly 525 gallons an hour. So let's just cut off all the rough edges and say that that filter moves 10 times the volume of this tank. So if there is microbial life in this tank, let's just say it's algae. Let's say we're dealing with green water, and you want to use your UV sterilizer or clarifier, depending on what the package said when you purchased it, and you want to clean your water and clear your water back up. Well, it does a fantastic job. In fact, that's why I bought my very first UV filter, was because I had green water in what is now my Black Ghost Knifefish tank. It was a different tank. It was my African tank way back in the day, and the water was green. And I put the UV filter in there, and it cleared it up within days. It was completely clean. So why is that? I mean, if it's not killing the bacteria or killing the single-celled organisms, like, that doesn't make sense to me if that's not going to be considered a sterilizer, because that's exactly what's happening. Is the amount of algae in the water is dying off, whether the sterilizer kills it or not. It prevents it from breeding and expanding. So as every cell dies, you can think of it as a war of attrition. It's just no more new cells are replacing the ones that die off, and eventually once they're all gone, your water is nice and clear. How is that different than sterilization? The real key difference is, again, it's a different industry. The water in your fish tank is not intended to be consumed, or it's not for human consumption, so it doesn't need to be classified as to whether it's sterilized or not. So in a technical sense, no, you cannot sterilize the water in one pass over that little UV light and over that little volume of water that passes through there. But with this tank, as I said, we're talking about roughly 10 times the volume of this tank every single hour. So that's 240 times a day that water goes past that UV light. It's just going over it and over it and over it and over it. So while it can't be classified as a sterilizer because A, it doesn't meet drinking water standard or industry standards, but it also doesn't have that intensity of sterilization in one pass the way something that would be required in the industry for drinking water to be able to do it. And that's why technically your UV sterilizer in your filter is not really a sterilizer. It can't really be called that. Unless, of course, you don't really care because you're not talking about drinking water industry, and therefore it's not wrong to call it a sterilizer. There's no regulation that prevents somebody from saying they have a UV sterilizer on their fish tank because it's not designed to have drinking water going through it, and therefore it's not regulated by that industry, and it doesn't fall within those codes. So, make what you want out of that. I'm okay with calling it a sterilizer because in the long run it achieves the same end result. Any microbial life that you have living in the tank is effectively killed off. If you want to not call that sterilizing it, then you can not. If that makes you happy to say, well, you clarified the water, okay, then call it clarifying. I personally am okay with calling it a sterilizer because effectively it's doing the same thing. It's just doing it over a longer period of time in this closed system where the water travels over and over and over and over that UV light and eventually you achieve those same end results of not having any microbial life living in your water. Now, for anybody that might be thinking that your nitrogen cycle, the bacteria that nitrifies the ammonia in your tank, might be affected by a UV light, it is not. That grows on surface area. It is not waterborne, and all one of these UV sterilizers do is kill waterborne or sterilize waterborne microbial life. So any algae you've got living on the surface of anything is going to stay right where it is. That light's not magic. It has to be waterborne, and it has to pass across that light. And of course, it has to pass across that light multiple times to really make sure, you know, enough disruption to the genetic code happens that it's not going to continue to breed, and effectively, de facto, sterilizing your tank. Again, regardless of what you want to call it, that's the same end result. So that's my 2 cents. Make sure you put your thoughts in the comment below. I'd be interested to hear your opinions or your thoughts on the subject matter. As always, make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss anything else I got coming up. You never know what it's going to be with me, and it's usually something worth watching. So thanks for watching this one. This is my gourami tank. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.